My father waited until the sweet potatoes hit the table. That was when he stood up, tapped his fork against his glass, and smiled at me like he was about to tell a cute story from my childhood. 30 people turned toward him. My mother folded her hands in her lap and lowered her eyes. My aunt stopped passing the rolls. Even the kids at the card table near the den went quiet. Then my father slid a cream-colored folder across the tablecloth. It stopped right in front of my plate. "Before dessert," he said. "Your mother and I thought it was time Paige understood what it cost to raise her." A few people laughed. Just a few. Nervous laughs. I opened the folder. At the top of the first page, in bold, was a title. Itemized Cost of Raising Paige Morgan. Birth to age 18. Under it were lines. Formula. Shoes. Pediatric visits. Winter coats. Electricity. Dance lessons I never even wanted. Gas for school pickup. My share of the family phone plan. A percentage of the mortgage. Total. $200,184.63. My mother dabbed at the corner of one eye with a napkin. My father lifted his glass. "We're not asking for it all tonight. We just think gratitude should mean something." The room did that strange thing rooms do when something is wrong and everyone knows it, but nobody wants to be the first person to say it. My cousin Leah, sitting beside me, slowly set down her fork. I looked at the bill again. The numbers were neat. The formatting was careful. They had planned this. And the worst part was, 6 months earlier, I might have folded. 6 months earlier, I might have cried, or apologized, or laughed in that weak, embarrassed way people laugh when they are being humiliated and still trying to save the moment. But 6 months earlier, I had not known why my mortgage application was denied. I had not known why my credit score had fallen off a cliff. I had not spent nights on my apartment floor with bank statements spread around me like crime scene photos. I had not learned that my parents had been using my name like a tool since I was a child, so I didn't cry. I put the first page back on top of the stack. I smoothed it with my fingertips. I looked up at my father, then at my mother, then around the table at all the faces, waiting to see whether I would shrink. Instead, I said, very calmly, "Can everyone stay seated for a minute?" That changed the air. Not because I was loud. I wasn't. But because my voice sounded steady. Too steady. My father's smile thinned. "Paige, this isn't meant to be dramatic." "No," I said. "I know. That part was done before I got here." Leah let out one sharp breath beside me. My aunt across the table looked down into her lap. Uncle Dan, my father's brother, frowned at his plate like maybe the stuffing had suddenly become complicated. I pushed back my chair. "I left something in my car," I said. "I'll be right back." My mother sat up straighter. "Paige, honey, don't make a scene." I looked at her. That word. Honey. She always used it when she wanted control to sound like comfort. "I'm not making one," I said. "I'm finishing yours." Then I walked out. The November air hit cold and clean. The front yard lights were on. Cars lined both sides of the street. Through the dining room window, I could see silhouettes still frozen around the table. In my trunk was a black accordion file, reinforced corners, labeled tabs. I had packed it an hour before leaving my apartment and told myself I probably wouldn't need it. The truth was, I had known I would. Not because I knew the exact stunt my parents were planning. I didn't. But because by then, I knew them. I carried the file back inside. When I came through the front door, the house was quieter than before. Not holiday quiet. Waiting room quiet. I set the black file on the table beside the folder my father had prepared for me. His eyes dropped to it, then came back up. "What is that?" he asked. I took my seat. "It's my copy of the family math." Nobody moved. I opened the file, rested one hand on the first tab, and thought, not for the first time, about the phone call in May that had started all of it. I had been at work, Wednesday, just after lunch. The mortgage broker sounded embarrassed before she even said my name. "Paige, I'm sorry," she said, "but underwriting flagged a serious issue on your credit file." I laughed at first because I thought she had me confused with someone else. I was 28. I worked as an operations manager for a physical therapy network. I had been saving for a condo for 3 years. I paid my bills early because I liked the feeling of seeing them disappear. I had one car loan almost gone, no credit card balances, no missed payments. What issue? I asked. There was a pause. Several accounts tied to your social security number. Long history, high utilization, one old personal line of credit. Your score came in at 532. My hand had gone cold around my coffee mug. That's not possible. I'm looking at the report now. The office around me kept moving. My coworker down the hall laughed at something. Someone fed paper into the copier. A patient at the front desk was asking about insurance cards, and all of it felt very far away. She read off dates. A store card opened when I was 10, a Visa 2 years later, a personal line of credit when I was 16. I wrote them down on a sticky note because that was what my body knew how to do when my mind stopped working. Write it down. Make a record. Then I went home that night, logged into all 3 credit bureaus, and found the first address attached to those accounts. My parents' house. I remember sitting cross-legged on my rug with my laptop open and saying the address out loud to the empty room, like hearing it might make it less real. It didn't. The first document I pulled that made my stomach turn wasn't even the balance history. It was the scanned application image from an old department store card. On the signature line was my mother's handwriting. Not maybe, not close. My mother's handwriting. The long tail on the Y. The careful round capital M. The slant she had taught me to correct in 5th grade when she said my cursive looked lazy. My mother had signed my name to a credit application before I was old enough to legally sign anything at all. I didn't call her that night. I didn't call my father either. I stayed on the floor until after midnight, going line by line through statements, dates, addresses, and purchases. Furniture stores, hardware stores, grocery chains. A yearly cluster of charges in early December. Christmas shopping, probably. At one point, I found a charge from a home appliance warehouse made the same week my parents replaced their refrigerator. I remembered my father standing in the kitchen, saying he had gotten a good deal. I remembered believing him. By 2 in the morning, belief was gone. In its place was something colder, a pattern. And once I saw the first pattern, I started seeing the others. That is how it happens sometimes. Not all at once. Not like a movie. More like a room slowly brightening until you realize what you thought was a shadow is actually mold running up the wall. I called my mother's older sister the next morning. Aunt Celeste had been a bank manager for 26 years before she retired. She was not warm in a showy way. She never talked just to fill silence. She was the one person in the family who asked direct questions and stayed still long enough to hear the answer. When I told her what I found, she didn't interrupt me once. Then she said, "Pull your tax transcripts too." I stared at my kitchen window. Why? Because people who misuse one form of identity rarely stop at one. She took a breath. And Paige, I need to ask you something. Did your mother ever talk to you about your grandmother's education account? I felt my throat tighten. What education account? Silence. Then Aunt Celeste said, very softly, "I was afraid you were going to say that. My grandmother Ruth died when I was 8. I remembered her perfume, her velvet sofa, and the little ceramic dish by the front door where she kept butterscotch candies that always tasted slightly stale. I remembered her telling me I had a serious little face and smoothing my hair back when I read aloud to her from library books. What I did not remember was anyone telling me she had set aside money for me. According to Aunt Celeste, my grandmother had funded a custodial account and a college savings account the year before she died. Nothing enormous by rich people's standards. Huge by ours. Together, it had been just over $90,000. My mother was the custodian. When you were 21, Aunt Celeste said, I asked Donna if she had transferred everything to you. She told me yes. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. No, I know. There was no drama in her voice. That made it worse. She helped me figure out which institution had held the accounts after 2 mergers and a name change. It took forms, notarized identification, and the kind of patient persistence most people do not realize is a form of grief. Every call required me to explain a little more. Every letter forced me to see my own name in relation to something that should have belonged to me and apparently didn't. While I waited, I requested my IRS transcripts. The packet came in a plain envelope 4 business days later. I opened it standing at my kitchen counter. Then I sat down and read it again. Then a third time. For 2 tax years, after I had moved out, my parents had claimed me as a dependent. Not by accident. Not once. Repeatedly. I moved into my first apartment at 23. I knew the exact date because I still had the email with the lease attached. I paid my own rent, bought my own groceries, covered my own health insurance after I aged out, and filed my own returns. And during that same period, my parents had checked boxes that told the federal government I was still dependent on them. I started doing rough calculations. The credits they received were not small. Neither were the risks if the IRS ever decided to untangle it. I stood at my sink with the transcript in my hand and felt something in me shift. Until then, part of me had still been trying to preserve an explanation. Maybe my mother had panicked about money when I was young. Maybe my father had not known how much. Maybe there was some line, somewhere, where bad judgment ended and deliberate theft began. The transcripts erased that line. This was not one desperate decision. It was repetition. It was maintenance. It was a system. The account records arrived the next week. I took them to Aunt Celeste's condo because I didn't want to open them alone. She made tea neither of us drank. The first page confirmed the account. Names, the beneficiary, and the original deposits. My grandmother's name sat there in black ink, ordinary and final. She had done the thing she intended to do. She had built something for me. Then came the withdrawals. Steady at first, modest enough to sound harmless if you wanted them to. Later, larger. One for qualified educational support. Another for beneficiary-related expense. Another with no useful note at all. What mattered was the destination. Each transfer landed in my parents' joint checking account. Aunt Celeste took off her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. I kept turning pages. At 24, I had still been paying off student debt from community college and my bachelor's completion program. I had worked a campus library desk, then a front office job, then nights at a gym. There had been one winter. I lived on rice, eggs, and store-brand soup because I was trying to keep my balance above water and didn't want to ask anyone for help. All that time, there had been money. Mine. Gone. I asked for copies of the transaction timelines and started building a binder. That sounds clinical, and maybe it was, but order was the only thing that kept me from splintering. Blue tabs at first. Then I switched to black because the office supply store was out of blue and I was too tired to care. Section 1. Credit reports. Section 2. Scanned application images. Section 3. Account records. Section 4. Tax transcripts. I thought that would be enough. Then Aunt Celeste asked one more question. Did you ever receive survivor benefits after your grandfather died? I looked up. My grandfather died before I was born. Yes, she said, but your grandmother was his surviving spouse. Depending on timing, there may have been benefits connected to you after she passed. I did not want there to be another section. I truly didn't. By then I was waking up at 3 a.m. with my jaw clenched and checking the front door twice before bed as if fraud could walk in on feet. But wanting had become irrelevant. So I requested the Social Security records. The letter took almost a month. I opened that one in my car. Outside work, because I could not stand another evening of staring at an envelope on my counter. My mother had registered as representative payee when I was 8. Monthly benefits had been collected in my name for years. The total was a little under $50,000. I read that number 3 times. Then I remembered being 14 and asking for money to go on a school history trip to D.C. My father had told me no without looking up from the television. My mother had said, "We can't do extras right now." Sweetheart, I hadn't gone. I remembered paying for my own SAT prep book with babysitting money. I remembered wearing shoes with cardboard inside one heel because the sole had cracked and I didn't want to ask for a new pair before winter. The thing people imagine in stories like this is greed, but greed by itself is too simple. What shook me was the layering. The way one lie had been built on top of another until my entire childhood looked different from above. Not fake. Worse than fake. Useful. I added a fifth section to the binder. Then I totaled everything I could. Document with confidence. Fraudulent accounts and related debt. Misused custodial and education funds. Improper tax claims. Misappropriated survivor benefits. Just over $200,000. I sat back, in my desk chair, and looked at the number until it stopped meaning money and started meaning shape. This was the shape of what my parents had built underneath me. And still, even then, I did not march into their house and explode. I wish I could say I became clear right away. I didn't. I hesitated. Because even after all of that, some part of me was still my mother's daughter, still the child who had been trained to look for tone before truth, still the girl who knew my father could turn a room with one glare and make other people's discomfort feel like her responsibility. So I tried one small test. I called my mother on a Sunday afternoon. I kept my voice light. "Hey, Mom, random question. Did Grandma Ruth leave anything in an education account for me?" There was a pause. Not long, just long enough. Then she laughed softly. "Oh, Paige! No! Your aunt loves stirring things up, doesn't she?" I stared at my bookshelf. So, there was nothing? Nothing worth talking about. If there had been, we used it for you over the years. School, clothes, all of it. Parents do that. I said nothing. My father's voice rose in the background. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard mine. Then my mother came back, gentler than before. "You worry too much. Come early on Thanksgiving, okay? Your father wants help with the turkey." When we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed and understood, finally, that there would be no confession delivered in private. There would only be whatever happened when truth collided with performance. So I finished the binder, and on Thanksgiving morning, before I left my apartment, I put it in my trunk. My parents' house looked exactly the way it always did on holidays. Too many cars, too much food. My mother's wreath on the door. My father's smoker going in the driveway like a piece of heavy equipment. Noise leaking through the windows. It almost worked on me. Familiarity is powerful that way. It can make danger smell like cinnamon. I brought a pecan pie from the bakery near my place because my mother had once told me my homemade crust was good, not great. And I no longer volunteered for evaluations that weren't asked for. My younger brother Noah opened the front door before I knocked. He was 31, broad-shouldered, tired-looking, and carrying his 2-year-old daughter on one hip. She had applesauce on her sleeve. "Hey," he said. "You made it." His wife Erin waved from the hallway. Noah had always been easier than I was in my parents' eyes, not because he was cruel, mostly because he drifted where conflict required anchoring. My parents called that being easygoing. I had a different word for it, but I loved him anyway. Inside, the house was loud enough to blur. Cousins in the den, football on mute. My mother directing traffic from the kitchen in a tone that sounded cheerful until you listened closely. My father at the carving board, already flushed with heat and authority. "Paige," he said without smiling. "Pie goes there." I set it on the counter. My mother came over and kissed the air beside my cheek. "You're late." I checked the microwave clock. I was 6 minutes early. Traffic. She took that in with a little nod, as if adding it to a ledger. Then she leaned closer and said quietly, "Please be pleasant today." There are sentences that only make sense if you know the family. That was one of them. Please be pleasant meant, do not react to what we do to you. Do not ruin the tone. Do not make the truth more inconvenient than the lie. I smiled at her. I was planning to. By 1 o'clock, every chair was filled. My father insisted on saying grace. He always did. "Lord," he said, "thank you for family, for provision, and for the sacrifices parents make that children may never fully understand." The word sacrifices sat there between the mashed potatoes and the crystal gravy boat. I remember because my cousin Leah looked up at me right then, just once, as if she had felt it too. Dinner moved in, starts and stops after that. Side conversations, passing dishes. My mother reminding people to try the cranberry relish. My father telling the same story about a man at the hardware store who didn't know how to sharpen mower blades. And under all of it, something taut. I noticed my mother glance 3 times toward the sideboard where that cream folder sat near the candles. She had dressed for the day in soft green and pearls. She wanted to look maternal. Injured if necessary. The kind of woman people instinctively defend. My father wanted to look practical. They had planned the optics. That part, somehow, offended me almost as much as the theft. Then came the speech. He stood, tapped his glass, smiled, said 28 years, said investment, said gratitude. Then he handed me the bill. It is strange how quickly your body can cool when your mind finally catches up to the fact that something is exactly what you feared. No shock. Not really. More like a door locking into place. When I came back in with my file and sat down, my father was still standing. My mother's lips were pressed tight now. She did not like variables. I rested my hand on the first section and looked around the table. What I saw surprised me. Not agreement, not exactly. Confusion, discomfort. A few faces already bracing. That mattered, because my parents had not only built a story for me, they had built one for everyone else too. The difficult daughter, the ungrateful one, the one who moved away and thought she was better than her family, because she liked spreadsheets and boundaries and apartment leases with her own name on them. If I was going to speak, I needed to break the story cleanly. So I did not start with rage. I started with dates. In May, I said, my mortgage application was denied because my credit score had been destroyed by accounts I didn't open. Noah looked up fast. My father's mouth hardened. This is not appropriate. It became appropriate when you made my existence a debt. I opened the first section. Oldest account, department store card. Opened when I was 10. Address listed. This house. I held up the document long enough for the people nearest to me to see. Then the visa. Then the line of credit. I did not rush. That was important. Rushing makes truth sound emotional. Slowness makes people hear numbers. My mother tried first. Paige, you're misunderstanding paperwork. Families help each other. Sometimes parents use a child's information for what? I asked. The room went still. She stared at me. I asked it again. For what, Mom? She looked away first. That was the first shift. Small, but visible. I moved to the scanned application. This signature matches your handwriting. My aunt on my mother's side. Denise put a hand over her mouth. Noah frowned. Mom? My father cut in. Your mother managed the household. If something was opened, it was for family needs. I looked at him. That sentence, not denial, justification. My cousin Leah heard it too. I could tell by the way her spine straightened. So you knew, I said. He did not answer. That was answer enough. I went to section 2. My grandmother set aside funds for me before she died. Over $90,000. Mom was custodian. My mother's voice sharpened. That money was spent on your education. No, I said. It was transferred into your checking account. I laid out the statements in order. Not all of them. Just enough. Dates. Amounts. Destination account. My father was red now, but my mother had gone pale. I took out my phone and placed it on the table with an old photo pulled up. Their backyard renovation. Stone patio. Outdoor kitchen. My mother smiling into the camera under a string of lights. The timeline matched one of the largest withdrawals. Nobody said anything. Some silences are passive. This one was not. This one was judgment forming. At the far end of the table, Aunt Denise whispered, "Oh my God!" My mother turned toward her fast. You don't know what things cost. You don't know what we carried. There it was, not innocence, burden, the moral frame they had always used. Look how hard we worked. Look what we suffered. Look what you owe us for surviving us. I moved to the IRS transcripts next. For 2 years after I moved out, they claimed me as a dependent. My father barked a laugh with no humor in it. An accountant's dispute over taxes? That's what this is now? No, this is a pattern. I held up my lease commencement email on my phone, then the transcripts. I was paying my own rent. They were collecting credits using my name. Erin, Noah's wife, slowly turned toward him. Did you know any of this? She asked. No, he said immediately. And I believed him. Noah looked sick. Then I opened the final section. By then, nobody at the table was pretending this was a misunderstanding. My mother collected survivor-related benefits in my name for years after Grandma Ruth died. My voice stayed level, but I felt that line under my ribs. The old one. The child line. The place where grief and practicality scrape against each other. I found the records last. My mother began to cry. Real tears, probably. That was the difficult thing about her. Her feelings were real even when her story wasn't. She could be manipulative and distressed at the same time. People like tidy villains. Real life rarely gives them to you. We were drowning, she said. You don't know what it was like. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, quietly, I know what it was like for me. And for the first time all day, my voice almost broke. I know what it was like to buy my own exam fees while money meant for me was coming into this house. I know what it was like to hear, no, we can't afford that, while you were using my name to keep your life looking stable. Nobody moved. Not even the children now, though I doubted they understood the words. Children understand temperature before content. The room had changed temperature. I took out one final sheet. A single summary page. The total. Not estimated with fluff. Only what I could support with documents. A little over $200,000. I set it beside the folder my father had handed me. You gave me a bill for raising me, I said. But you already took more than that. The first person to stand was not one of my dramatic cousins. It was my brother's wife. Erin pushed back her chair slowly, like someone rising in church, and said, Noah, get Olivia's coat. The whole table turned. My father stared at her. What are you doing? She met his eyes. Not teaching my daughter this is normal. Then she bent, picked up her toddler, and stepped away from the table. Noah stayed seated 1 second too long. Just one. Long enough for everybody to see the choice arrive. Then he stood too. He didn't say a word. He took the coat from the hook by the back door and followed Erin. That was the second shift. Bigger this time. My mother made a sound like she had been struck. Noah, she said. Don't you walk out on your family. He stopped in the doorway but did not turn around. He said, very quietly, I think that already happened. Then he left. The back door closed. The house held that sound for a second. My father looked around for support and found only avoidance. Eyes lowered. Napkins adjusted. Water glasses lifted. Leah reached for my hand under the table. My Aunt Celeste, who had stayed silent until then, finally spoke. I verified the account records myself, she said. If anybody here thinks Paige invented this, they're welcome to review the documents. My mother swung toward her sister. You always hated me for marrying him. Celeste did not even blink. Donna, this stopped being about old resentments when you used your daughter's identity. That line landed hard. You could feel people choosing sides even if they never spoke them out loud. My father, meanwhile, decided volume was still an option. He planted both hands on the table. So what is this? A takedown? A holiday ambush? You wait until we're all together and humiliate your mother? I almost smiled at that because of the sheer nerve. I said, you handed me a bill in front of 30 people. That was about gratitude. No, I said. It was about control. He opened his mouth again, but I kept going because if I let him seize the rhythm back, he would turn the room into weather and make everyone feel safer pretending they were confused. I am not here asking for a speech, and I'm not here asking for tears. I'm here because my name is legally attached to damage you caused. So here's what happens next. I took out a 1-page letter. I had drafted it 2 nights earlier and printed 3 copies. 1, I said. You will cooperate with the fraud disputes on every account opened using my identity. My father laughed once, ugly and sharp. Or what? Or I escalate it formally. He stopped laughing. 2. You will amend the tax years in which you claimed me improperly. My mother whispered, Paige. Please. I didn't look at her. 3. From this point on, there is no private rewriting of this story. Not with relatives. Not with friends. Not with me. My father's face changed then. Not to guilt. To something meaner. You think you're so smart, he said. You got a little job, an apartment, a few papers, and now you think you can sit in judgment over the people who gave you life. There are phrases that are supposed to make daughters fold. That was one of them. I felt it hit the old part of me first. The trained part. The part that used to translate cruelty into duty. Then I felt it pass through. I don't owe you rent for my childhood, I said. Very simple. Very clear. Leah squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. My mother was crying openly now. We fed you. We clothed you. We did our best. I looked at her. Feeding your child is not alone. Nobody said anything after that, because there wasn't anything left to hide behind. My father looked suddenly older than he had an hour earlier. Not smaller in a sympathetic way. Smaller the way a performance looks small after the lights come on. Uncle Dan stood next. He was my father's older brother, a man who usually avoided conflict by physically leaving rooms before it started. This time he stayed just long enough to look at my father and say, "You should have let this die in private." It sounded like a rebuke to me at first. Then he added, "But since you didn't, she's not the one who embarrassed this family." He set down his napkin and walked out through the front hall. Aunt Denise followed him 10 seconds later. Not dramatic, just gone. 3 departures. Different from what my parents had planned. The house felt looser with each one. I closed the file. My father said, "If you do this, there's no coming back." That sentence might have terrified me a year earlier. At that table, with the smell of cooling turkey and candle wax and my mother's expensive hand cream in the air, it did not. I said, "Coming back to what?" That was the third shift, the last one that mattered, because the whole architecture of my family had depended on one idea, that losing them would be worse than losing myself. Once that stopped being true, the structure failed. I stood. Leah stood too. Not to make a speech, just to stand with me. I put the summary sheet, the letter copy, and one business card for the fraud department contact back into my file. I left nothing behind except the printout of their own bill. My father was still at the head of the table when I picked up my coat. My mother said my name one more time. Not loudly, just, "Paige." I turned. For a second I saw something real on her face. Not innocence, not apology either. More like fear that the version of me she understood no longer existed. She said, "After all we did for you." And there it was, the final invoice. Not on paper this time. In language. I looked at her and said the truest thing I had learned all year. You keep naming parenting like it was charity. Then I walked out. Leah came with me. Outside, the cold hit hard enough to clear the smell of the house from my hair. We stood on the driveway beside my car. Somewhere down the block, somebody was laughing in another home, another meal continuing untouched. Leah hugged me first, then she pulled back and said, "I thought I knew your parents." I looked at the black file in my arms. So did I. I did not go back for Christmas. That may sound obvious, but families like mine train you to doubt the obvious. By the next morning, my mother had already begun the repair campaign. Not repair of what she had done, repair of the narrative. She called relatives in tears, first the ones most likely to sympathize, then the ones most likely to spread a softer version of events. She told people I had misread financial records. She said stress from the mortgage had made me paranoid. She said I had attacked them without understanding what parents sacrifice. My father used a different tactic. Silence in public, fury in private. 3 voicemails. 2 texts. "You humiliated your mother. You've always wanted to punish us. Do not involve outsiders in family matters. I saved everything." That was one of the first things trauma teaches you when it finally becomes visible. Stop arguing. Start documenting. On Monday, I mailed the formal letter by certified mail. 90 days. Cooperate with fraud investigations. Amend the tax filings. Provide written confirmation. No emotional language. No insults. No history lesson. Just deadlines. I sent a copy to Aunt Celeste for my records, and a scanned copy to a secure folder in the cloud because by then I trusted redundancy more than promises. The first week after Thanksgiving felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just stripped. Like a room after furniture has been taken out and the dust outlines are still visible on the floor. I went to work, answered emails, sat in meetings, approved staffing changes, corrected scheduling gaps. All the normal things. And under every normal thing was the knowledge that I had detonated the role assigned to me and my family, and there was no putting it back together the old way. Noah called on the following Thursday. He sounded tired. I didn't know, he said. I believed him. But belief and absolution are not the same thing. I know you didn't, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Aaron won't bring Olivia over there right now. That seems wise. Another pause. Then, carefully, I should have noticed things. You always paid your own way. They helped me with the down payment on this house. They helped me with the truck. I never asked where the money came from. There it was. Not evil. Not innocence. Benefit. That is how family systems survive. Not only through the people who cause harm, but through the people who accept unevenness as normal because it falls in their favor. I'm not asking you to carry my guilt, he said. But I am sorry. This time I let that one land. Thank you, I said. We were quiet together. Then he said, I don't think Aaron's wrong. About Olivia. I don't either. Christmas moved to Aunt Celeste's townhouse. Smaller table. Better food, honestly. Less performance. More breathing room. My parents were not invited. No formal vote happened. No grand announcement. People just kept choosing the place where they could eat without pretending. That, more than anything, told me the old center had cracked. At dessert, Noah stood in the kitchen with a dish towel in his hands and apologized to me in front of everyone there. It was not polished. He stumbled. He said he had benefited from silence and did not want to do that anymore. I did not cry. I did something harder. I believed change might be possible in one branch of the family, even if it never came in the original. House. The formal pieces moved slowly, exactly as every bureaucratic website warns you they will. The credit bureaus opened investigations. One issuer closed the oldest account after confirming application irregularities. Another requested additional documentation. The line of credit took the longest because it had rolled through 2 servicing companies, and the original records were archived badly. My parents amended one tax year, then another. Not because they had suddenly become honest, because consequences had become expensive. My mother sent me a 6-paragraph email in January that contained the words devastated, misunderstood, heartbroken, and ungrateful. But not the word sorry. My father sent nothing. That silence was its own confession. By March, my score had started to climb. Not restored, not healed. Just moving in the right direction, which is sometimes the most honest form of hope. I reapplied for a mortgage in June. This time, when the call came, I sat in my car outside the grocery store because I had not realized how badly I still feared phone calls with polite voices. The broker said, "You're pre-approved." I closed my eyes. For a second, I saw myself at 10, then 16, then 23 carrying thrift store lamps into my first apartment because that was what I could afford. Then 28 at a holiday table being told I should pay for the privilege of having been raised, and layered over all of them was the woman I had become. Not untouched, not triumphant in some glossy way. Just intact enough to keep building. I cried in the parking lot for 7 minutes. Then I bought dish soap and spinach because life is rude like that. It keeps being ordinary right after it changes. I have not cut my parents off with a dramatic declaration. That would suggest more access than they currently have. What I have now are terms. I do not meet them. Alone. I do not discuss money. I do not respond to guilt framed as love. I do not take calls after 9 at night. I do not absorb revisionist history to make other people comfortable. Those are not punishments. They are load-bearing walls. My mother still sends birthday cards. Her handwriting on the envelope looks exactly the same. Sometimes I hold one for a second before opening it and think about how long I confused familiarity with safety. My father has never apologized. That used to feel like an unfinished sentence. Now it feels like information. Noah and I talk more than we used to. Leah and I talk all the time. Aunt Celeste still sends me articles with headlines like 7 documents every adult should store in fireproof protection, because that is her love language. Last month, I toured a small 2-bedroom condo with terrible wallpaper and morning light in the kitchen. I stood by the window and pictured a table that belonged to me. Not expensive, not grand. Just mine. A place where no one would ever turn care into debt. That is the thing I understand now. My parents wanted the bill to do what it had always done invisibly: reduce me, make me feel costly, make gratitude bigger than memory, bigger than evidence, bigger than self-respect. But once I saw the numbers clearly, the spell broke. Love is not a balance sheet. Parenting is not a tab you hand your daughter when the pie is served. And if someone keeps receipts for your childhood, what they are really counting is power. They gave me a bill at Thanksgiving. I brought proof. What I kept was better than the money. I kept my name.